Good morning, Nigeria. Welcome to another episode of Breakfast Central. We're counting the days to Christmas, and quite frankly, the end of 2024. The year is moving with, such fast pace, and we hope that we're all excited. We know that the year hasn't been quite the year, but that we can make the best of the remaining days. This morning on Breakfast Central, a number of conversations will be had, and we'll share with you what these conversations are shortly. I'm Olive MOD.
And I am Kayode Egbetokun. And of course, as we welcome you, we would like to remind you to be a part of our conversations this morning simply by following all social media platforms at News Central TV. Let's know your thoughts on these stories as we, of course, share them with you. The phone lines will be open sometime in the 8 o'clock hour, so you could also have your thoughts on these stories out there. Before we get into our top stories for today and, of course, the news headlines, one popular story that we've noticed in the last 24 hours is the story from the EFCC releasing details, even though partially, of a recent bust that they've made and a forfeiture, that has been ordered of more than 700 properties in the FCT. Now, while this, for many people would be a win, for the EFCC or for Nigeria's fight against corruption, which, I've continuously shared my views, about. There's one thing that is obvious, with it, which is the fact that the crime seems to have been committed by a ghost. And so, when the EFCC had to recruit Ghostbusters to help them investigate this crime, the Ghostbusters immediately swung into action with their,
spirituality.
Exactly. And, then also consulted Ayelala back then in Benin City to ensure that they catch, these ghosts. And then, of course, they led to the forfeiture of these properties because, unfortunately, you need to go to the spirit world to know who is responsible for that crime, who owns those properties, who's the person that these properties were seized from. And, if you are not in the spirit world, then you may not be able to get any information, on that. Because I'm from Edo State, I know who is responsible.
So you're on a certain frequency.
On a certain realm, yes.
Wow. And I'm hoping that you can, do Nigerians the honor of, because some of us are not on that frequency, we're not on that realm. So you can share with us this deep secret of who this top asset recovery agent is.
No, it's not. It doesn't work like that.
It's not for public consumption.
It's not for public consumption. So you need to, first of all, have access to the Ghostbusters. After that, they have to work with Ayelala, and then they will be revealed to you.
Ayelala for me.
Yes.
Well, I mean, you just shared the story, and once again, it highlights what Nigerians would share as the distrust between government officials, institutions, and the citizens. Because what we see is that it's one thing for you to be seen to be fighting crime. It's another thing for people to agree that you are indeed fighting crime. The EFCC has been accused for doing a lot of media trials, media show-offs, and a stark comparison has been made between this case and the case of Yahoo boys, like we call it, internet fraudsters. Mm-hmm. Now, when these Yahoo boys are caught, one or two, and even those that are suspected to be Yahoo boys, because they've been in situations where people have been wrongfully arrested, but they're taking their mugshots, they're posting their mugshots on social media, they're putting out press releases saying they arrested so and so, they're stating their names and their ages. Why is this such a big secret? And what exactly is even of a top brass official?
It took a while, even, and that was after a lot of backlash from Nigerians for the EFCC to stop revealing the faces of suspects, internet fraudsters. If you remember,
yes, they
were called out multiple times before they then stopped, showing their faces, and realized that okay, yes, it is illegal to show faces of people that, have not been found guilty of a crime. So there's that part. There's also the part where, if you remember, I've said it, a few times, that it seems that there is a different justice system for the rich and then, the different one for the poor. And here's why. When in the Buhari administration, there was a revelation from the United Arab Emirates of Dubai or somewhere about the terrorism sponsors.
Yeah.
They released names over there. But here in Nigeria, we never got to know who the Nigerians were or who these people, that were.
You know what it reminds me of? The song of African China, that unfortunately still rings true, I think about 20 years later. I think he sang it 20 years ago, I'm not quite sure now. When he said, poor man wait still Maggie, them go show him face for crime fighters.
Exactly.
Rich man wait if money, we know they see their face for crime fighters.
Which is very true, and it still is a legitimate saying till date.
Yes.
And which is heartbreaking because again I keep reminding Nigerians that we don't have any excuse to still be doing things the way we do things in 2024. There's no legitimate excuse why we still have not been able to improve on our criminal
institutions.
justice system,
Yes.
on our electoral system and the likes. But another thing to point out is that this completely defeats the whole idea of a fight against corruption. It once again makes it seem like the EFCC is shielding the people. And if you don't take a proper stance as an institution of government, if the Nigerian government itself hasn't realized that it needs to take a proper stance against corruption, shame who needs to be shamed, when necessary, not just those who the government doesn't like, then we are completely, deceiving ourselves if we expect that we're fighting corruption that way. It needs to take a proper stance. It's the same thing with, again, this is maybe the 7th time that I'm bringing this up, that the Auditor General released a report a week ago saying that 197 billion naira has been, allegedly, missing from MDA, certain MDAs in Nigeria, till now. And I keep wondering what is the use of the Auditor General's office every year? Because there's meant to be an Auditor General's report at the end of every year, right? But it's not the first time that the Auditor General is putting out damning reports like this that just make headlines and disappear. There's no follow-up. There's no investigation. We don't know who's running the NDAs, or these MDAs rather. And of course, the people who are alleged to have mismanaged these funds. It just disappears from the news. I mean, since the day that it came up in the news, that's the last that we heard of it. There's
we don't
no
have a track
investigation.
record of following up with stories and getting to a logical conclusion of these stories. We've seen that many times. I mean, you've cited it one scenario, but there are many that we can name, and that we can list. It just feels like there's so many missing parts that we never get. It's a puzzle, an incomplete puzzle, this fight against corruption. But until we get to the point where EFCC can be good, and I like what you said about naming names, not necessarily because of the fact that you don't like these people. So these institutions should not be seen as tools to be used in the hands of government to be able to witch hunt the people that they don't like. But actually, I mean, one of the tweets, we're going to take this much later when we look at what Nigerians are saying. One of the tweets, somebody said, but if it's Murphy now, you people will have called his name very easily.
Oh, absolutely.
And what this does is that it leaves room for speculation. If you go on X, different people's names have been called. So many people, past governors, serving governors, even the name of a former first lady has been mentioned, all because there's a lacuna that the EFCC can easily fill, but they have chosen not to fill it and then left Nigerians to speculate. And in the course of doing this, a lot of innocent people will be defamed. So this is also an opportunity to mention to people to be careful with speculations that they're making in this case until we're sure, until the EFCC comes out to speak. But then again, maybe this is just a teaser. The EFCC just wants to spice up the story a little. So
no, but I mean, it means that you're joking around.
Or maybe they would then say, because Nigerians had criticized them for all the time, whenever they would show people's faces and all, we would say, oh, Section 36 sub 5, you're taking away the presumption of innocence, you're condemning them to be guilty. Well,
no, but if a court has ruled,
exactly. So
I mean,
there's really no explanation for it.
There's not, and I was gonna play devil's advocate and say, okay, maybe that's the reason that the EFCC doesn't want to reveal who this person is. Then don't tell us at all. And that's honestly the way that Nigerians feel. Don't tell us at all. If you're not going to let us know who the person is, if the person has been found guilty and the court has ruled that this property be seized, then we might as well know who the person is.
It feels like
if they still have government positions today, because it's very possible. Positions. Yes, it's very possible that they still have government offices.
In fact,
today
that's one of the speculations we've seen online. People are saying that it's possible that these persons or this person is in the current administration and is serving, and that's why the EFCC feels the need to protect them. But if they're playing games, we don't want to know. Nigerians just need a name. I think that's where we have gotten to. In this fight against corruption, Nigerians are tired of the hide and seek, and the EFCC does have a lot to do to redeem itself. But do you foresee that maybe they will cave into the pressure that Nigerians are mounting?
No, I don't think so. But the reason people want to know who is responsible really is because I believe that everybody who's reacting to that story, pretty much feels the same way, that it doesn't do any justice to the fight against corruption if you would conceal the identity of the people who you found guilty of such crimes. I mean, nobody should applaud, the EFCC for its fight against corruption, because one of the things that it's meant to do, or one of the effects that it's meant to have, is to deter people from such crimes. if you know that at the end, when you're found guilty, it will be public information that, yes, you stole. You mismanaged government resources, you stole from government coffers, you transferred money from government coffers into your personal account or whatnot. You used money that was meant to be used for government functionalities to build estates in the Federal Capital Territory. If we do not get the identity of the persons, then it completely defeats the purpose,
right,
of the fight of deterring people from engaging in financial mismanagement across the country.
Also, I think another question that would arise is the source of that money, the source of the funds that was used to get 753 duplexes in a 150,500 square meter estate in Abuja. We need to get to the point where we can decentivize, I think that's the word, but remove the excess incentives that politicians and political office holders have. So I'm hoping that that's something that, a conversation that can come up shortly. Is there something you'd like to add before we head?
No, I think we probably we've very likely summed up the thoughts of many Nigerians concerning this particular story. And again, it is not just this story; it's also the other ones. It's also the Auditor General's report. It's previous, corruption stories that we've heard, and of course, the whole idea of us fighting corruption when we're doing it, so shabbily, somehow.
I just mentioned that much later this morning we'll be taking this story as what Nigerians are saying and taking some of your tweets and reactions to these stories. But before we get there, let's share with you what our top stories this morning are. This morning on Breakfast Central, Nigeria, France signed MOU to develop mineral value chain. We'll look at what the implication of this is, and IGP orders investigation into death allegations. Moving away from that, we are also going to be looking at labor union embarks on strike over minimum wage. Labor strikes again. Still this morning on Breakfast Central, stakeholders, lawmakers disagree on Procurement Act. And now we also would review the newspaper front pages as we do every morning. And you get to call in and share your thoughts. All these and more on Breakfast Central. Now let's bring you breakfast headlines.
Welcome to Breakfast Headlines. The Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetokun, has ordered an investigation into allegations of the Nigerian Police Force culpability in the deaths and arrests of protesters during the August End Bad Governance protest that happened nationwide. Amnesty had, in a briefing published a few days ago, accused the Nigerian Police Force of using excessive force against protesters during the nationwide End Bad Governance demonstrations between the 1st and 10th of August, killing at least 24 people in the states of Borno, Kaduna, Kano, Katsina, Jigawa, and Niger. In a briefing titled Bloody August, Nigerian government's violent crackdown on End Bad Governance protests, Amnesty said those killed during the include 20 young people, an older person, and 2 children. And the chairman of the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission, Dr. Musa Adamu Aliyu, SAN, has called on the National Assembly to take decisive action in the fight against corruption. Dr. Aliyu made this appeal on Monday during an ICPC roundtable engagement with state attorney generals in the Northwest held in Kano. He urged lawmakers to immediately pass the Whistleblower Act bill, a move he says is crucial to bolstering the nation's anti-corruption efforts. Now, troops on the Joint Task Force Northwest Operation Fansan Yaman have dealt a major blow to banditry in Zamfara State. In a fierce operation in Maru local government area, scores of bandits were neutralized, while several others fled with serious injuries. According to a statement released on Monday by the coordinator of the Joint Media Center, Lieutenant Colonel Abubakar Abdullahi, the troops launched an operation following a distress call from residents and vigilante in Ya Galadima village. The attack occurred on the early hours of Sunday, prompting the military to spring into action. Troops quickly mobilized to the scene, engaging the attackers and restoring calm to the community. Still in the news, a fire broke out early Monday morning at Trademore Estate Market in Abuja, located off Umar Musa Yar'Adua Airport Road. The blaze, which started around 4 a.m. local time, caused panic among residents. While the exact cause remains unclear, a resident suggested it might be electrical. Firefighters from the Dunamis Church fire rescue teams responded promptly, arriving around 5 a.m. to contain the flames. According to eyewitnesses, a combined efforts from the EFCC and Sauka fire stations extinguished the fire by 6 a.m. local time. A ceasefire broker, Angola, will host a summit on December 15th to advance peace talks between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda over the DRC's troubled east. Since 2021, the Kigali-backed and largely ethnic Tutsi M23 rebel militia has seized swaths of the eastern DRC, displacing thousands and triggering a humanitarian crisis. Angola in early August mediated a fragile truce that stabilized the situation at the front lines. But since the end of October, the M23 has been on the march again and continued to carry out localized offensives. Despite violations of the ceasefire, the DRC and Rwanda are maintaining diplomatic dialogue through Angola's mediation. Still in the news, Namibia's leading opposition presidential candidate, Panduleni Itula, has announced that his party will not recognize the results of the country's controversially extended election. Speaking just before polls closed on the final day of voting, Itula, leader of the Independent Patriots for Change, IPC, accused the process of being marred by chaos and alleged foul play. He noted that regardless of the outcome, the IPC shall not recognize the results of this election. That's all on Breakfast Headlines. Now let's head back to Breakfast Central to continue with our top stories. I am Kayode Egbetokun.
Stakeholders in Nigeria's public sector have rejected the proposed amendment of the Nation's Procurement Act, suggesting stricter penalties for contractors who delay or abandon projects in the country. Now, this was during a public hearing on a bill to amend the Nation's Procurement Act, which was held in the nation's House of Representatives. Our correspondent, Idong Joseph, reports on this story.
The prevalence of delays and abandonment of public projects by contractors in Nigeria has become a significant source of worry. While this has prompted calls for effective legislation to address and resolve these challenges, Nigeria's House of Representatives during a public hearing says that an amendment to existing Procurement Act which calls for stricter penalties on contractors who fail to comply with their contract terms is apt.
This culture of project delays preceded the current problem of inflation and devaluation. Hence, it is a problem that we now must address from a legislative perspective. The instant problem impacts governance in Nigeria and has affected our ability to deliver the dividends of democracy to the Nigerian people.
However, stakeholders at the hearing expressed varying opinions, insisting that such penalties already exist.
It is my considered opinion that the proposed amendment is not necessary, as this has been adequately provided for in all general conditions of contract and standard bidding documents as a matter of practice. This is in line with best global practice. I have come with original documents by FIDIC to address this point.
The Bureau therefore recommends that the committee should rather help in the proper implementation and enforcement of the existing laws by ensuring that funds for contracts awarded should be provided as and when due.
Lawmakers say that the Act will be reviewed in a bid to embrace efficiency and accountability in government's contractual process. In Abuja for News Central, I am Idong Joseph.
Thanks to Idong Joseph for that report, and those conversations obviously must continue. But we'll move on to other things. Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu recently paid a visit to France in what many have called a landmark event that has led to the pivotal agreements in Nigeria-France collaborations, particularly in the area of infrastructure, energy, agriculture, solid minerals, and more. Nigeria and France deepened their cooperation in the solid mineral sector with a memorandum of understanding focused on critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, nickel, vital for clean energy technologies.
The agreement includes joint research, knowledge transfer through student exchanges, and sustainable mining practices to minimize environmental impact. Additionally, it addresses the remediation of over 2,000 abandoned mining pits in Nigeria. It will also focus on transportation, agriculture, renewable energy, and healthcare sectors. Both nations have committed to mutual trade enhancement, fostering better cross-border services, and eliminating fiscal barriers while prioritizing labor rights and sustainable development.
Now, despite the landmark agreement, a section of the populace is concerned that France has recently been accused of illegality by different West African nations and has further suffered a blow when a series of coups from 2020 hit its former colonies in Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Now, joining us to look at the recent agreement purportedly signed with Emmanuel Macron in France and how they would impact Nigeria's unstable economy, we have Kayode Egbetokun, who's joining us from the United States, and also Global Affairs Analyst Adetunji Omotola. Good morning, and thank you both for joining us.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
I'm going to start with Mr. Okpa this morning. The most common fear, or concern that many people have expressed is Nigeria right to be, making these agreements, these bilateral agreements with France, seeing, the relationship that it has had with Francophone Africa and other countries, neighboring countries, in the last, couple of years. The mood towards France has not been one, that describes it as a very supportive country. And so, are these legitimate concerns that people have?
Thank you for having me. It's legitimate because France is Francophone and Nigeria is Anglophone. I think in recent memory, this is first time a Nigerian president is going to such a country that didn't colonize Nigeria, and a country that most West African countries have tried to walk away from or walked away from. So Nigerians are concerned to start wondering why did Tinubu go there. This agreement, I don't even know whether anybody has reviewed it and what is in the agreement. But, there shouldn't be any big excitement about it because this is just a memorandum of understanding. Until you see the French companies or see money being sent to Nigeria as a result of that, then maybe there'll be reason to celebrate. But so far, it's just another trip that Tinubu has made. Tinubu is, your traveling sales president who, when you look at it, I don't know what he has sold. Because for more than a year now, he's been in office. You can look at what is happening to the Naira. The Naira Tinubu has witnessed or continued to be a witness to the devaluation of Naira in a year of being in office. So nothing he has said or nothing he's promised has given the Nigerian economy confidence, and that confidence is measured based on stability of the Naira. And the Naira has been a basket currency. It has been eroding ever since he came to power.
All right, let's bring in Mr. Omotola into the conversation as well to find out if you share similar sentiments regarding what the relationship or the seeming relationship between Nigeria and France. Do you share similar sentiments with Mr. Okpa?
Yes, your guest is very much on all fours. Well, I'll be on all fours with him. Firstly, as you very well know, in the past few years, there's been a lot of topsy-turvy between France and its former colonies, especially Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. In fact, they've been kicked out of this country. They don't want to have anything to do with France. And of course, as you well know, most of the countries that are French colonies, former French colonies, I don't think there's a single one of them that is a model for development in Africa. So whether it's Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire, even, I mentioned some of the other ones, Mali, Guinea, Togo, That's where you have guys who are sitting in office for 40 years, 35 years, and their resources are being extracted. And then you have on top of that insurgency and conflicts from Chad to Mali. So the French don't really have much to offer Africa. In fact, I don't think any country, no matter how powerful, has much to offer Africa. Africa will have to dig itself out. And that's why we're excited about the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. But then again, there's more talk than action. I think, but on the lighter side, I mean, the president has been traveling to France on a regular basis. So maybe with this latest junket, they wanted to give it a cloak of opportunity that we have signed a document or an MOU with France. Because this for me is just a show, because the president is also on his way to South Africa. He'll come and sign another raft of agreements and nothing will happen. There are 34 agreements or treaties between Nigeria and South Africa. Nothing has changed since 2000, when President Obasanjo started coming to South Africa. So I think it's just it's a PR exercise. And also, as my colleague said, the devil is in the details. We have not seen anything. It's just headlines, almost on a similar platform as we saw 4 weeks ago about the mining conference in South Africa, $700 billion in assets potentially, but we haven't seen anything. There's no single job that has been created for all those conferences.
Yeah, so when you say the devil is in the details, it's a similar sentiment, that I have had. I always have this worries that what you see in the news is not really what is going on. It's really just what politicians like to show you. That's the part that they can tell you. There's, likely other details that are not being discussed. When we have these bilateral agreements, if you monitor the relationships that countries have with the West, when, you have United States, Secretary of State, for example, fly to Africa, and they take pictures with these African leaders and whatnot. It's really just a photo op. But what is really going on behind the scenes is what you need to pay attention to. And so that is a concern that I have. And I think Mr. Ejike can speak on that one. Do you also believe that, there should be some worry with regards what really might be going on behind the scenes? And hopefully this is not fear-mongering, but should that be something to worry about? What Nigerians are not being told about these bilateral agreements?
After what is democracy, so many go back to 1999 when this whole thing started. Thanks to my colleague here who mentioned Obasanjo. When Obasanjo came to power, if you had 1 million naira, you had an equivalent of $12,000. Okay? So 25 years, if democracy is a panacea or is a factor to enable economic development, by now maybe naira should have been $50,000 or 25. That is doubled what it was when they started in 1999, but it hasn't been the case. So today, 1 million naira is an equivalent of something like $600. Any Nigerian who knows what this means should be shaking their head. How have we gotten here? Why have we gotten here? You have all these presidents, go all over the world, any little invitation, they hop in the plane. It's like there's no restriction. The National Assembly is a rubber stamp. They don't question the president. So if they can't question the president, why do you even have a National Assembly? Why do you have the senators? Why do you have the House members? But everybody's sort of like, hey, even the president, is he going to invite them? So, Tinubu has been, again, the one who has shown his abusing the authority of the presidency. When he became president, a friend of his who came to Dallas said, hey, would you write him? I like your ideas. I wrote him, I said, Mr. President, what you need to do is go and talk with Nigerians. Go to each of these 6 political zones, invite the people to a place, or hop to every state capital. It's not to go see the governor. Have a town hall meeting. And I said, hey, this is what I inherited. This is the challenges I had. What do you guys just talk be quiet for a minute, ask people to tell you what they think needs to happen. Mr. President hasn't done it. Maybe he did it, Nigerian media didn't carry it. But every little thing, Tinubu is in the plane. Whether he's going for a stomach upset that he wants to find a cure or they get treated by foreign doctors or anything, he travels. And so it makes you wonder, is the plane a private thing for him, or is it actually, to enable him to do the job as a president? Does he have to go to everything that is invited to? You have foreign ministers, you have minister of trade or commerce, whatever, send them, sit at home, deliberate on the challenges. Nigerians are suffering, and there's nothing anybody has done since Obasanjo to now to sort of address it and give Nigerians the confidence. What has France got to do? France is an exaggerated Western country that has nothing. Those of us that live in America, we don't even have French cars being sold in America. What does that tell you? The Peugeot they do at the Citroën, nobody buys those things. What technology is it that they have? Macron is not an effective leader. In fact, if you go back now, the French government is looked upon about being about to collapse because the prime minister is not getting anything done. They have a huge deficit and they try to hike the prices of taxes on certain things in order to make up, and the French people still don't want it. So does it mean Nigeria intelligence or Nigerian foreign ministers don't look at this and Mr. President, here are the issues where you are going. We don't really have to go there. France has more gold reserve than all the African countries that are producing gold. France has no gold mine. All France is doing is going to some of these weak African countries and trying to impress them. The reason that Air Afrique, if you remember, there was this airline that France had at the time that was hopping all over Africa. In 1999, when they wanted to join the Euro told them, hey, for you to do it, you have to divest yourself from all this African engagement. And that's why they did, and they abandoned them. So now a country that hasn't been effective, like my co-guest said, addressing their former colonial thing, is one Nigeria, the biggest English-speaking African country, is going to embrace. So it calls to judgment. What is Tinubu thinking? And that Tinubu so far has not given the Nigerian the confidence about being the president, that means or whatever he called it, that is his stand, that's not what makes somebody want to serve a country like Nigeria. You have to be effective, you have to be grounded, you have to know the issues. If the exchange rate of the Naira keep eroding, nobody that is a serious investor would allow the companies to come and do business in Nigeria. Because again, they can't pay back the debt. If your currency keep devaluing, how are you going to generate the revenue for what you have borrowed in order to pay back what you have?
Okay. Thank you very much for highlighting that. Let's bring Mr. Omotola into the conversation and look at a much bigger picture that is beyond Nigeria. Now let's look at Africa, West Africa. We've seen that a number of these countries in the Sahel region have exited ECOWAS. A number of them the French-speaking countries have rejected France. Having seen now that our president, who's the chairman of the ECOWAS, and they've been trying to mend the fences with a number of these countries, but it doesn't seem like it's working. Do you foresee, or what would you say are the implications of Nigeria aligning itself with France? Do you think that would further strain the relationships that these countries have with ECOWAS? And how do you think that this will impact the regional bloc?
Okay, firstly, look, I think it's important for us to establish some key facts. In the ECOWAS sub-region, once you take out Ghana and Nigeria, the other countries are not really, they're not really economically viable. And I'm not saying that there aren't opportunities in Cote d'Ivoire or Togo or Mali, but when you really looked at the stricto sensu, even if you look at the GDP, once you take out Nigeria and then Ghana, ECOWAS is really an organization that has very fragile states in it. Chad, Niger, Cameroon, with Paul Biya since 1982 as leader and no succession plan at the age of 90. So I don't really take ECOWAS very seriously. And that's why Nigeria going to sign with France is really a punch in the face of those smaller countries that have been dominated by France, putting all their money in French central bank and having to borrow back the money. I think Nigeria will be seen as a sellout by those countries. I think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has already shown his ability to just go off on his own to take major decisions without consultation, whether it's within country or within the region. I think it's not a very good optics to see the president in France with Emmanuel Macron, the same Emmanuel Macron that rushed to N'Djamena to watch the swearing in of the new president of Chad, the son of the former dictator, Idris Deby. Macron was there in a tent attending to that inauguration, ensuring that their plan was not messed up. So our president should know better. But then again, he's also the same president that wanted to go to war with Niger Republic when Mohamed Bazoum was removed in a coup. Without a cabinet in place, he was going to go off on a limb and go to war with our neighbor. And we have strategic interest in Niger Republic. So I don't think it's a good thing. But having said that, Nigeria is in a real economic mess. And so President Tinubu will run to any leader, especially a global leader, for succor and for support, or even to show up his own image in Africa that, look, despite Nigeria's wars, despite my wars at home, I can still be received on a grand scale by a global leader, which that's what it is. So I think that's the challenge.
Yeah, so I want to now speak about, the idea of throwing away the baby with the bathwater. I'm going to, again, bring back HK out, with this one. So, these points that have been highlighted, are very important. The ECOWAS point, the relationship with Francophone Africa, what France has been known for with regards to its relationship with African countries. But Nigeria at this point needs help. Just like Mr. Omotayo has highlighted, Nigeria needs help. And so, can you excuse the Tinubu administration for seeking help where it can find it, regardless of what it would, cost on the public image or whichever point you can make? Can you excuse him for seeing that our solid mineral sector desperately needs help in order to revive it and be able to make billions, hopefully billions of dollars from the solid mineral sector every year? Is this, something that we can lean towards and say, okay, well, this is going to be a, great benefit of this bilateral relationship, reviving the solid mineral sector, and that's why Dele Alake was there. And so ignore the other things that people are pointing out about the fears. Ignore the fear-mongering concerning what France's relationship has been with other countries, and focus on the billions of dollars that can be made from France helping us to revive our solid mineral sector. Is that something we can look at?
Again, there's nothing to look at. This is more about shield and substance. Okay, France has nothing to offer. Okay, if you're talking about the mineral sector, now I'm asking you the question: what is the global mineral company out of France? And mark you, the French president is not going to tell any French publicly traded company to go do business in Nigeria. It is not his call. It's not like in Nigeria where the president can tell NNPC what to do. Some of these Western countries, their companies are global, they are publicly traded. The board of directors have to make a decision, and that decision has to be what that will bring what they call the shareholder value. So what is that company? Are you trying to borrow money and then you lend it to the Nigeria, or are you going to get both money and the equipment and the company? So it's not just borrowing money. You have to remember in economics, what matters are the terms and conditions. There are a lot of capability in Nigeria. What it doesn't exist is so far the Nigerian government through its various agencies haven't been able to channel and capture those talent in order to be productive in what they have to do. So borrowing money, what creates wealth actually is equity and debt. So when you borrow, which then becomes the debt, you have to look at, can I generate the revenue from the debt in order to do what? Pay back. If you want to borrow money in Nigeria, look at the terms and conditions. And why are you doing that? Where is your exchange rate? Again, that money has to be paid back. If it's borrowed in euro, you got to exchange it in naira to go pay it back. I'm just saying that Tinubu has not sat down properly, hold himself to his seat in office and said, hey, I don't need all this relationship. I need to have one good relationship in order to drive this. And that relationship has to be with the Nigerians. He has not endeared himself to the Nigerian people. All he does is hop in the plane any opportunity he goes, and then he go to do what? You go say, oh, I'm here to promote something, give me time. And then again, it makes you wonder, why would the president of Nigeria and the president of France, you have a minister, look at the picture, look at the three of them. You know, you try to figure out who is who. He and Macron should have been the one, the minister should have been the person in behind, and then you hand him the document. You know, it makes it look like the minister is the president, while, you know, what is his name? Tinubu is out there to cheer up. So again, the Nigerian image has been damaged because all past Nigerian presidents don't know how to promote what Nigeria really wants. You have capable Nigerians that are outside of Nigeria. You have no fund, you have no lending capacity, you have no institution that is sympathetic to the Nigerian situation, nor the World Bank, which can lend money to private sectors, nor the IMF that comes in to stabilize, you know, government deficit. So none of those. So how are you going to all of a sudden go to France? Again, France is not considered an effective country in the world. The reason is because it's a white country, is in Western Europe. Other than that, there's nothing coming out of France.
Does it even matter to you? I mean, there's a report by the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics, the National Bureau of Statistics, I beg your pardon, and the report says that Nigeria's exports to France surged to over 3.9 trillion naira in the first half of 2021, that there's a positive trade balance, that we've had more exports, and France has become our top export destination. Does that make any difference to your perspective about France not having?
Yeah, but how much is trillion? I mean, a trillion naira is what, $600 and something thousand, times 3. So you're actually doing less than
$2.4 billion.
Okay, so is that something 200 million people should be jumping up and down and being excited? You know, again, you have to talk about what will impact the naira, what will stabilize the naira. It's not some of these little things here and there, and then they throw in the naira and in trillions and the billions, and then when you exchange it, it's really nothing. I'm just saying that France, this visit to France by Tinubu, you know, maybe down the road it will show something, but it hasn't. You know, when you look at the naira since this announcement has made, has there been any stability? You know, you look at the exchange rate, the interest rate, has there been any movement towards, you know, lowering the interest rate? All of those things is more like a show. Nigerians want substance. You know, the show of going everywhere and then even visiting with countries that are no longer relevant is telling the world that you haven't done your homework. You know, Warren Christopher, who was a former Secretary of State before Madeleine Albright, said before he left office, because he had a tour of African countries, he said France should hands off their grip on their former colonies. France is still one country that wants to remote manage, not only remote manage, they want to be in the forefront of what happens in these African countries. Nigeria has no business with France. I don't think they can do anything to help Nigeria. If you want help, you go to somebody who is stronger, not a country that is already weak.
All right. Let's bring in Mr. Omotola into the conversation. Do you share same sentiments? I just mentioned to him that the National Bureau of Statistics has said that France has become Nigeria's top export destination, having exported 3.9 billion naira, or trillion naira. That's approximately $2.4 billion. Does this make any impact? Do you think that Nigeria maybe has something to gain from France in this regard?
Well, we should first of all look at that value in relation to our GDP. I think it's very minuscule. I mean, if you look at the fact that a company like MTN Nigeria is about $5 billion on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and the Nigerian Stock Exchange is very, very small when you compare it to the $1 trillion market capitalization of the South African Stock Exchange. So in fact, our exports from oil, total exports from oil in 2021 was about $45 billion, which is just twice Dangote's wealth. So we really are not an export nation. We're not known for exports. Nigeria is known for importation. That is what our DNA is all about. We are very shy of exports. And with these minerals that we have that they bandy around $700 billion in value, potentially, the former NBS Director General, Dr. Yemi Kale, told us about a month ago in Johannesburg that even with all the potential investments from the mineral sector, it will only amount to about $25 billion over the next 10 years and probably will create about 3 million jobs. So 3 million jobs in a country of over 200 million people is not a lot of jobs. So we need to put all of these things in context. That's why I said, and that's why it's a pity that the opposition in Nigeria or the media, they don't do enough research. We need to, as Mr. Ekpa said, we need to look at the details. How do these agreements impact on the lives of the man in Ikotekpene or the lady in Molete in Ibadan? We can't just be, excited that the president, tomorrow it might be Biden, the next day it might be Trump. We've seen former President Buhari go and meet Trump and sign the Tucano deal for $500 million. How has those jets, how have they improved the security of lives in the northern part of Nigeria? That's what we need to be doing. We mustn't get excited when we see an African leader with a world leader signing agreements or a minister looking radiant, holding a document that may not even get to Abuja. They might just throw it in the bin. Because we've signed so many of these agreements, and Nigerians are still dying of hunger. 133 million Nigerians are multidimensionally poor. I call it the pure water economy. Pure water in the sense that so many rich folks, but too many people are starving and running away, the Japa syndrome. So this president needs to sit at home, behind his desk, put on a shirt and trouser, roll up his sleeves, and get busy, because the next election he'll be telling us he has done this, done that, but we're not seeing anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, since we started, that these are, some of the most popular concerns that many people have with these agreements. And, I'm also, making sure that I highlight, the details, that may not be revealed with these type of agreements. The possibility that there are other details that have been also agreed upon that are not, revealed to the Nigerian people. And you mentioned, that the opposition parties, this is what they should be doing. Pretty much same thing with the National Assembly, I believe. This is some of the roles that they should be playing to have the government to answer these questions. But I again, don't want us to really just focus on the negatives. So I'm gonna, have Mr. Motayo address this again. Are there any things that we can benefit from a relationship with France? Now, my colleague highlighted the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics figures, about trillions of naira in trade. Isn't there a possibility that with stronger bilateral relationship with France, with these agreements, we will be able to improve on those figures? We would have maybe France become one of our top 3 trade partners. Yes, I know that Ejiko said that France has nothing to offer. But, is there a way that these agreements can also increase on whatever trade that we have with France, and also improve on our mineral resources? Because I know that there's so many, if you look at the Middle Belt region in Nigeria, there's a lot of mineral resources that are really just lying there, doing absolutely nothing. So are these some things that we can maybe improve upon over time?
Is that for me?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so basically, look, I think that what I would have loved to see the president do, because, he was there with an expanded team, Dangote, the Bois gentlemen, Lumelu, and so on. I would have loved to see made in Nigeria products being exposed. President Macron did not for 1 second get a sense of products that are manufactured in Nigeria, whether it's our palm wine, whether it's our, our fruits, whatever we have. Because we say we want to diversify away from oil. Then we're putting all our eggs in the minerals basket when we have agricultural produce that are unique to Nigeria. Everywhere you go now, I mean, we've just had an opportunity to host the Jollof Wars competition in South Africa. And why are we doing so? Because we're tired of eating foreign food. We want to eat jollof rice and baewedu, egusi, ekpankukwo. How can you have 220 million people and you have your diaspora in almost every single nation on earth, and you can't promote your food aggressively? Because people have to eat every day, whether you're rich or poor. And that's how you make money from food. It's a low-hanging fruit. You never see our president doing that. So I'm very worried about this junkets. He needs to stay at home. If I had his passport, well, he doesn't need a passport. But if I have the key to that plane, I will take it and hide it. The man is traveling all too often, and the conditions for the people on the ground are not changing at all. And that's the reality of this embarrassing specter. He's even coming straight from France to South Africa.
I was going to ask you. Yes, I was going to ask you to speak. Yeah, I was going to ask you to speak to that, because he's currently in South Africa. I should have landed in South Africa yesterday.
Yeah, he's coming at the wrong time, madam.
Yes,
madam, the president needs to read the room. He's coming at the wrong time. In South Africa right now, there's a lot of furore about food poisoning. So children, young kids as young as 6 are dying of food poisoning. And they're accusing foreign nationals, especially from Bangladesh, Somalia, and Pakistan, of being the reason behind it, because they say they sell expired food. There's also illegal artisanal miners that are stuck in the pits for the last 3 weeks, over 1,000 of them. Most of them are from Mozambique, from Zimbabwe. They're working, most of them are undocumented. So the president is coming to South Africa at a time when there's a lot of anti-foreign national feeling. So he's not reading the room. South Africans are not going to be excited to see President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and even Nigerians are not going to be excited, because their problems are immigration and their problems are even employment. There's a high underemployment of Nigerians in South Africa, and many of them can't get their papers because the Home Affairs for the last 4 years didn't even communicate with anyone. They wouldn't respond to you. So the reality is that the president needs to deal with bread and butter issues.
All right.
When he comes to South Africa, he must focus on the issues that affect Nigerians, especially those who are in South Africa, in situ.
All right. I think my final question to Mr. Ejike Okpa would be, you said France has nothing to offer Nigeria. Which areas or which countries do you think that the president should be looking at? Or are you also of the view that the president has done enough traveling and needs to sit at home?
But, I wrote an article some years ago, so what they call index of nations, okay? It is a simple principle in economics. It says scarcity creates value. The Nigerian presidents haven't made themselves scarce. They just always, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if a group of, countries invited the president to a child naming ceremony, he will hop in the plane and go. Stay at home. France, again, has nothing to offer. France is not a global economic power engine. Because what companies out of France, apart from their cheese and their wine and their crackers and stuff like that? Is that what Nigeria should be looking forward to? The staple food of Nigeria is not being produced by France. I mean, the garri, the yam, the plantain, all these things, these are tropical stuff. You have enough Nigerian agricultural economists or agricultural scientists who can sit down, if you are properly enabled, that will come up with a solution for some of these things. I'm saying, if you're going to do a relationship that enhances where you are, not a relationship people are going to look at and laugh at you like, what are you thinking? What are you doing? What is this going to lead? Anytime a president goes to another place to say, I am doing this for economic reasons, this is not a diplomatic thing. The spike has to be with the confidence in the currency and the growth in the economy. How many trips has Mr. Tinubu done ever since he became president? It's probably coming up to 50. So for the time, that means if he's done 50 for a year plus, that means for every 1 month, he's actually out of the country 3 times. You should not be vacating your seat of power to other countries for this length of time. Convince the Nigerians. Look at the Naira. Compare yourself. If you look at the first 4 years of Tinubu, Obasanjo, Buhari, Jonathan, and all these other people that have been over there, look at where the exchange rate is, because that's the measure, and say, oh my God, what is going on here? How can I do what? Reassure Nigerians that the erosion of their currency can be handled with, and it's not going to be handled by you being a traveling salesman who is not selling anything. All these things, can anybody tell me where are the spikes in the top sectors of Nigerian economy? Where is it in the power? Is it in transportation? Is it in Total? It's a French company doing oil and gas in Nigeria. It's not even one of the biggest ones. So again, you go into these places, you build up an image, but that image is punctured. Because even when Tinubu speaks, excuse me for saying this, you don't understand what he's saying. He may speak, but he doesn't really communicate. What happens in a relationship, you have to be able to communicate what your needs are to the other side, whether it's bilateral or multilateral. Nigeria has the benefit of a president that has what in America we call the gift of gab. You have to sell eyes to the Eskimos. The reason you do that, you got to convince the other side. This is more like coming to the negotiating table, that, hey, you work with me, you partner with me, this is how both of us are going to benefit. Nigeria hasn't gotten any. Of all the agreements they have done since independence, go back. If Nigerians are critical thinkers or analytic in all this agreement, this is where students should be going and doing their dissertation, putting in any of these agreements and looking after the fact, not after, before, because it hasn't produced for Nigeria. I really, my heart bleeds, because when I came to America 37 years ago, you know how much I paid for my trip from Nigeria to England to America? The England part of it is a stopover. It's 698 naira 50 kobo.
Oh, wow.
Can 698 naira today buy you a bottle of anything? Can it? But that's what I paid. In fact, the excess naira I had, I walked into my bank and they exchanged it to the dollar to help me open my first account. But today, if you take the naira as a currency to any bank outside of Nigeria, nobody's going to say, what is that? If you travel at the airport, you look at the exchange rate boards, you don't even see any African country listed. And so you have to begin to look at what are we doing? Is it the PhD that we don't have? Is there any university in the world that Nigerian hasn't gone and graduated? And then you have all these presidents who embarrasses Nigeria. When I looked at what Tinubu was saying when he just landed in France, I couldn't understand what the man was saying. When he talks to Nigeria, he sits down. Stand up. When you speak and you stand up to speak, you project better as opposed to when you sit down. These are some of the images. These are some of the optics the Western world are looking. When Trump met Buhari the last time, you know how he described him? He said he's lifeless. When you shake his hand, there's no vibe, there's no strength in it. That's how sometimes the Western world measures our people. It has nothing to do with what your title is. You look at your body language and then they want you speak. You watch Tinubu speak before Macron, who could even be his son. He looks very weak. You are the most populous black nation in the world. The Nigerian president should be such that when you speak, black people all over the world should be excited. Right. When I met Martin Luther King's wife, excuse me, let me say this point. When I met Martin Luther King's wife in 1999, March 1999, when Obasanjo was in Atlanta as a president-elect, you know what that lady said? She said, if Nigeria is what black people should be looking up to, the black race is doomed. That's a powerful statement.
Yeah. Okay.
The Nigerian president has conveyed confidence for Nigeria as well as the black race. They go all over the world, like children looking for child naming party so that they can go get some candy. Don't do that.
And unfortunately, when these things are highlighted, many people will tell you it doesn't matter.
It does matter in the Western world. Trust, it does matter. In Texas is where you have the most Nigerians in America. Texas. but no Nigerian president or governor has ever visited Texas in an official capacity. When the Chinese president comes to America, you notice he doesn't go to Washington, D.C. Where does he go? San Francisco, where you have a whole lot of successful, powerful Chinese. The president of America will leave Washington, D.C. to go to San Francisco to meet the president. The Nigerian presidents come in, they want to go to UN, who we don't care about UN, and Washington, D.C. is a political capital. So you have to craft your own image. Remember, this thing is about image. And as you're crafting it, your country is benefiting because people say, oh my God, your president did this. I like the way he did that. I like the way he said that. Nobody says that about Nigerian president.
All right.
Come on, guys. We have to do better than what Tinubu is doing. Tinubu is not selling Nigeria. He's selling himself. He's a very sick man. He can't communicate. Maybe he should get a bunch of people. He sit in front of them and speak and say, Mr. President, use this body language, use this word, because so far he's talking like an elementary.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's not the best picture that we have been able to paint. It does look like it's a gloomy look. I think that's what it looks like. But we will keep hoping for the best in Nigeria.
Let's Nigeria be real.
Understand that. I mean, we completely understand. But unfortunately, Nigerians want the best for the country. We want to see an improvement in the quality of life of Nigerians. And until we can measure the improvements, I don't think that Nigerians will be impressed by a number of the moves that have been made. Ejike Okpa, thank you so much for joining us. And Adetunji Omotola, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you guys for keeping me awake, but that's all right.
Thank you. You may now go back to sleep. Thank you. All right. That's all that we can take this morning regarding that. But you also can let us know your thoughts on Twitter, on X, at News Central TV. Are you positive? Are you optimistic about the relationship Nigeria is building with France? Or do you think, like our two guests have just said, that France have nothing to offer Nigeria? Let us know your thoughts. We'll share with you a recap of the conversations we've had this morning and also let you know what's coming up next. We have just assessed Nigeria-France MOU to develop mineral value chain. We're joined by Adetunji Omotola and Ejike Okpa, who spoke about this. IGP orders investigation into death allegations. We took this in the news as well this morning. And stakeholders, lawmakers, disagree on Procurement Act. Idong Joseph brought us a report in that regard. Now let's share what's coming up next.
Coming up next, Labour Union embarks on strike over minimum wage. And also the newspaper front pages, the major stories making headlines across Nigeria this morning. We'll also be sharing with you what Nigerians are saying.
Welcome back to Breakfast Central, and if you're just joining us, you're right on time. Well, maybe not for the whole show, but for newspaper reviews, as we share with you what the top stories are saying. And also we'll let you know that you can be a part of the conversation. All you need to do is to call the numbers scrolling on your TV screen and react to any of the stories that we'll be taking this morning. We'll begin with our first newspaper this morning, and our first paper is the Punch newspaper. On the front page of the Punch, tax reform. PDP others urge talks as presidency defends bills. Senators Opeyemi, Dixon, Kalu, reps back bills. Opposition parties want federal government against using force. EFCC seizes 753 duplex estate, hides ex-government top shot's identity. Federal government protests Nigerian army's probe by ICC. Tears as customs officer, wife, 4 others die in Osun fire. Really sad. Ajayi to appeal ruling upholding Ayedatiwa deputy's candidacy. Federal government auditors probe NNPCL's 2.7 trillion naira subsidy refund claim. 2027, APC dismisses threat by alleged splinter group. Low-income earners can withdraw total retirement savings according to Pencom. Men, isn't that a discovery? By the time people now realize that they can withdraw their total savings for their pension, I don't know how this is going to impact their finances, especially because it's been a really rough time, right? There are people who are going to these loan sharks to borrow money. People are just trying to make ends meet. But if they find out now that they can withdraw their total retirement savings, that's it. People are just going to withdraw the money. And I
also don't think you should be encouraged.
Yes.
Because there's a reason behind the idea of retirement, savings, and pensions. is to keep you going to some
when
extent.
you're not, when you can no longer work.
Yeah, unfortunately, and I thought I was, at some point, I've been thinking about doing a Which Way Nigeria on it, which is to express, to some extent, the reality of pensioners in Nigeria, what they have to deal with, after working for 35 years for the Nigerian government, the reality of how, largely, to a large extent, almost irrelevant, their monthly pensions are, because of, at that age, you are probably buying medication. You are still having to cater for yourself to some extent, because the Nigerian society has not been able to create an environment where
senior citizens are probably taken care of.
Yeah, senior citizens are probably taken care of, but at the same time, kids have good jobs, and this is, if you do a data analysis on the next 1,000 families, how many of them have their kids gotten to that age where they're comfortable, they can take care of themselves, the parents don't need to fend for them any longer. So I don't think it will be that many. And so, when you get to that, 75, 80 years old, how comfortable are you as a pensioner in Nigeria? And you would see that a lot of people are going through really, really tough times. So,
remember the day that we were returning from the office and somewhere on Lagos Island, there were a group of protesters.
Yes, I
They were
saw that.
protesting their pension not being paid. And it's the reality, unfortunately, of what is our senior citizens are not properly taken care of. So my worry is that with this headline, I will need more details. Maybe we'll reach out to PENCOM to come on the show, but it might encourage people to further spend even though they have legitimate reasons, for further spend their retirement savings and end up becoming stranded when they no longer can work. Final story on the Punch: minimum wage strike, Mwifuru fumes as 3 states and FCT grounded. And that's all on the Punch newspaper. Let's now move to the Leadership newspaper.
All right, on the Leadership this morning, big story here says, pressure mounts over tax reform bills. Kano Assembly rejects bill, passes resolution. Zulum advocates wider consultation. No provision to impoverish North, says the presidency. Insists TEF Fund, Naseni, NITDA won't be scrapped. Also this morning, Biden pardons his son over tax evasion charges in what has been described as maybe the biggest sign of hypocrisy in 2024.
And when his wife was asked what she thought about it, of course she was fully in support. And I wonder why this, I think everybody can see why this is happening now, of course, before a new president is sworn in. And you know what this will mean for Hunter.
Yeah, I think the major challenges is, first of all, the hypocrisy, the fact that, the Democrats had for the longest time made it seem like it was the Republicans that were the biggest demons in the United States. And of course, it was only Donald Trump who was, a danger to democracy and whatever name that they chose to call him. And then, of course, initially when he was asked about pardoning Hunter, initially he claimed that Hunter had no crimes or almost no crimes to answer for and whatnot, that those charges were really just being weaponized against him to punish Joe Biden, and of course, the weaponizing the justice system against Hunter Biden. If you remember, so those were some of the things that, led, but also most critically is because you need to also ask what exactly are these things he's been pardoned for. The relationships that he had in Ukraine with Burisma, I think that's the name of the company, where he was paid a substantial amount of money every month to be on their board. His alleged use of drugs. I think he has been pardoned now, so I don't think we need to say allegedly anymore. His use of drugs that have imprisoned thousands of Black Americans that were committing pretty much the same crimes or even less than what Hunter was doing. So it's just a lot of hypocrisy surrounding it, leading to him now pardoning his son, and of course, so it's not shocking that.
I don't know. I wonder. I'm not very informed about this, so I can't speak to it in terms of if a pardon can be reversed.
No.
Right, okay.
No. It's a presidential pardon, and that's it.
What I'm asking,
again, it's not shocking.
If Donald Trump, if it was possible, if Donald Trump got into power, you probably expect, but I don't know.
No, it's not, again, it's not surprising. Donald Trump still has the right to, as president, to pardon whoever he wants to pardon. I think he, was speaking about pardoning some of the January 6th protesters, and he did, pardon a few people before he left office in 2020, I believe. So it's not necessarily surprising that Joe Biden has decided to do it. It is the hypocrisy leading to it, and also what exactly the crimes are that were completely denied at first, and made it seem like everybody was dreaming for accusing him of having relations with people in Ukraine and with some Chinese investors back then, only for him to now turn around and then pardon his son. So that for me is the big issue with it. But we'll probably, I mean, it's a total different conversation. EFCC makes single largest asset recovery till date, and that's on the leadership once again. Minimum wage. NLC draws battle with 6 states. We could also find here stakeholders demand Nigeria's restructuring. Come clean on Edo election, Chidoka tells INEC. And, this is another opportunity to highlight the main question as to what exactly Nigerians are hoping to do in 2027. And, if we eventually, or when we eventually get to 2027, what is the electoral body that we are hoping would conduct free, fair, credible elections in 2027? Is it the same one?
The same INEC?
Exactly. Is it the same one that, of course, conducted the Edo State elections, that has these many questions that need to be answered in the Edo State elections? And I don't agree that it should just be ignored the way it is currently being ignored. I feel like Nigerians, or whoever is meant to be taking part in 2027 elections, must ensure that we clean up our electoral process to the best that we possibly can. And it doesn't make any sense, to carry the same electoral standards from 2023 to 2027 and expect a different outcome.
Well, I mean, to be honest, there are many Nigerians who might argue that they don't have much hope or anticipation. You check, there's a huge disparity in certain cases between what is enforceable. Is it the Election Act? Is it INEC's electoral guide? You can see the discrepancies. There's some things in the guide that are not in the Act, and they will tell you that is the Electoral Act that is the governing law, or is the governing legal instrument to carry out elections in Nigeria, superseded, of course, by the Nigerian Constitution. So all that disparity needs to be sorted out. Political parties as well, preparing for the elections. I mean, how ready are they? And, I was having a conversation yesterday, and part of the conversation was the fact that we all oftentimes argue about how Nigeria has a young democracy, but we're not really young. If you check the first time, political parties as old as 101 years this year in 2024. If after 101 years is the first establishment of a political party, we're still not yet ripe to run a decent democracy, because what we have right now is the Constitution doesn't allow single candidates. It allows or enforces running for office under the umbrella of political parties. If after 101 years we haven't put our act together, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So much work.
So the age argument is thrown around every now and then. But I don't think that those who use it have been honest. I think that they are being, deceitful, mostly because they choose, or they are looking for reasons why they shouldn't take blame for our failures as a country that is beyond 60 years, as a democracy. Of course, post-independence, I beg your pardon, to not be able to right its wrongs. We still have some teething problems that you would expect for a country that is still in 1950 or 1960s, maybe even the 1940s. That's where you would expect us to have a problem. And it's not like we're living in a bubble. We have many countries across the world that we see that we should be able to model the same level of free, fair and credible elections that they have. It's really just a lack of respect for the Nigerian people, a lack of respect for the electorate that makes these things refuse to be changed. And, year after year, administration after administration pretty much, does the same thing. And nothing changes. It's a complete lack of respect for the Nigerian people. And of course, the Nigerian people themselves have, not been able to demand.
I'm glad that you mentioned that part.
Yes. These things are fixed. If you don't believe or you don't trust the electoral system, you should make a demand that these things are fixed. If not, there's almost no need, encouraging people to go get voters' cards and take part in pretty much the same election, when they have zero trust for it.
Because the more we continue this system, the higher likelihood of seeing voter apathy. People will not show up again to the polls. And when people don't show up to the polls, it's grounds for manipulation of elections. Yeah. So we will continue
voter apathy is good for those who want to.
The repeat cycle. So electorate also need to demand better. And part of the way we demand better from our government is also by participating in the system. So not to say that politics is for those that want to do politics. We all have to be involved. We all have to, and part of it would also be bringing back, or I mean, if you think back to our growing up, you can't remember a lot of the time when we're adequately educated about how Nigerian politics run. Yes, we did a bit of government, social studies. It wasn't as in-depth. Maybe we need to go hard on that right now, because the change that we're looking for might not happen in the next 4 to 8 years. It's a gradual turnaround. It might, I don't know if it will be drastic, but we have to start preparing the next generation to come ahead, you know, those who are coming after us. If not, what we're doing is we're changing the wine, still leaving the old wine skin. And when new wine comes into old wine skin, it will still contaminate it. You know, but
I don't know that it should take that long if you're talking about waiting for the next generation for us to see.
So, of course, there are changes that will happen. I'm talking of a total overhaul of the current system as is. Might not happen overnight, right? It will not happen overnight. What I'm saying is, we need to start to involve the younger generation, involve the Gen Zs, involve the Gen Alphas, let them start to understand and be interested in politics. Because at the end of the day, they leave us to choose from the devil and the deep blue sea. They leave us when we don't have more decent, honorable people interested and participating in politics. What that does is it leaves us with a few bad choices to rule over the best of us. But anyway, we'll come back to talk more about this if we have some time. Let's move on to our next paper. We have the Daily Times newspaper. On the front page of the Daily Times newspaper, the big story, they're still talking about the tax reform bills that have gotten Nigerians' northern leaders rattled. Senate's second reading passage hasty sparks transparency, PRP chieftain says. Presidency says tax reforms won't harm North. No agency scrap plan. I know that the governor of Oyo State has come under fire as well for his statement regarding the tax reforms as Seyi Makinde. BNC, Federal Government South Africa to collaborate on geologist certification and professional standards. The President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is currently in South Africa, landed yesterday, and he's going to be co-chairing the 11th session of the Africa Binational Commission alongside President Cyril Ramaphosa, and it's happening today in Cape Town, South Africa. Good local government system will relieve states of unnecessary burdens, Speaker Abbas says. Edo governor swears in 3 judges, Obaseki delayed. And the top of the paper, Port Harcourt refinery, Tinubu leading Nigeria's transformation, says Okupe. And that's all on, that's all on the Daily Times. Let's move on to the next story.
This Nigeria newspaper comes up next. EFCC records landmark recovery of 753 duplexes from government official in Abuja. This is the single largest asset recovery by the EFCC since its inception in 2003. The estate rests was somewhere in Lokogoma district. Transport unions, residents and others decry the state of expressways in Lagos. August protests, IGP orders probe into alleged brutality. Tax reform bills won't impoverish North, says the presidency, and also Nigeria deepens ties with South Africa in infrastructure and mining sectors. I think, the popular reaction is, I'm not sure if the police should be investigating itself. If Nigerians were allegedly killed, what's it called now, of course, during the End Bad Governance protest, I believe the National Assembly should definitely have stepped in to create, or at least to set up a probe into the abuse of power, the alleged abuse of power by the Nigerian police. I don't know that the IGP will be able to find itself guilty, or the IGP will be able to find police officers guilty if that's what the case is. But once again, to talk, again about the EFCC's landmark recovery of 753 duplexes. Again, just as popular opinion has said, there's 753 duplexes from a government official who has, remained unnamed, mostly because the EFCC carried out this investigation and this recovery with the help of the Ghostbusters and Ayelala, because the person who committed this crime, who these assets have been recovered from, is, a ghost. He's unnamed, he's unknown, and, you have to be in the spirit world to be able to know who this person is, unfortunately. And so if you're not in that realm, you may not be able to identify who this person is, and the EFCC also cannot reveal it to you, except you are one of the Ghostbusters. That, of course, helped them, with the investigation and with this case. And I once again highlight, why this almost, it feels like it defeats, the purpose of the fight against corruption, if you have cases like this, but you can still see that there is something fishy about the way that the story is being told, that this government official has these, number of properties recovered, but nobody still knows who this person is. Is this person still in government? Is the person in jail? Is the person on his way to jail? Is the investigation still ongoing so that they can recover more? What exactly is the truth concerning this case? So we can know exactly why nobody knows who this person is that stole enough money to establish 753 duplexes in the Federal Capital Territory.
It's wild.
It is completely, insane. And so, once again, to remind everyone that, this defeats, somehow, some way defeats the purpose of the fight against, corruption. And it, it's another opportunity to highlight the fact that the Auditor General last week released a report stating that there's a 197 billion naira fraud that has been discovered in ministry departments and agencies, certain MDAs in Nigeria. And till date, we do not know who exactly has been arrested for that fraud, who is being investigated for that fraud, who will be answering for the crimes, if, the investigations, of course, are being done. Nobody really knows who is responsible for the mismanagement, the alleged mismanagement of 197 billion naira. And I'm once again asking, what exactly is the use of the Auditor General's report if at the end of the year, when these very damning reports are put out, there's almost no action being taken, or Nigerians do not know that there's any action being taken after the report? Why does the Auditor General bother releasing these reports and showing the amount of fraud and leakages, that occur through ministries, departments, and agencies, both on the federal and on the state level? Because it's not just a federal, situation. The leakages in government, the hemorrhaging that Nigeria goes through, where billions and billions and billions of naira really just leak away through inflated, contract figures, through fake contracts, through ghost workers. The billions and billions of naira that leak away, almost, never really detailed. Nobody really knows who is responsible or who was being arrested and who is being made to answer for those crimes. They're important questions. And so it's once again, letting the EFCC know that Nigerians are not satisfied by simply revealing the 753 duplexes that have been seized. Nigerians want to know who, has been,
who stole the meat from the cooking pot. I think I actually would. I will make reference to that when I'm doing Which Nigeria. So yes, Nigerians, or what Nigerians are saying, Nigerians really don't want to be taken for granted. If we must fight corruption, we must be seen to be fighting corruption, indeed and in truth, and not really a social media show of corruption fighting. I believe that these are the stories that we will take this morning on the newspaper reviews. The conversations continue on our social media platforms. At News Central TV is the handle if you'd like to tweet, or you can tweet at us individually on our personal or via our personal handles. We'll go on a very quick break, and when we come back, we have more conversations. Remember that this morning, we're looking at your thoughts on what Nigerians are saying. So the EFCC has announced what they claim is their single largest asset recovery to date. And by largest, we're talking about a 150,500 square meter estate in Abuja, complete with 753 units of duplexes and apartments located at Plot 109, Cadastral Zone C09, Local Government District, Abuja. It made this announcement via a press release on its official handle on X. Speaking about the forfeiture, the second paragraph of their post on X reads thus: the forfeiture of the property to the federal government by a former top brass official of the government was pursuant to the EFCC's mandate and policy directive of ensuring that the corrupt and fraudulent do not enjoy the proceeds of their unlawful activities. It also described asset recovery as pivotal in the fight against corruption, economic and financial crimes, and a major disincentive against the corrupt and the fraudulent. The press release is quite a long one that goes on to give further details, except one that Nigerians have considered the most important, which is the name of the top brass official. Why has the EFCC given us this story without giving us a name? What might be the reasons for the protection of this top brass official? Is this mystery person serving in the current administration? Will there be sanctions, or is this just fanfare to boost the reputation of the EFCC as a working agency? These are some of the questions that are being asked, even as some people have started making guesses as to who they suspect might be this mystery official. But then again, when you leave room for lack of clarity, that's what happens. All this is reflective of the trust deficit between the citizenry and the government, inclusive of its agencies. Ultimately, Nigerians just want a name. Kind of reminds me of the nursery rhyme, who stole the meat from the cooking pot? But now let's take a look at some of the reactions to this unfolding drama. Our first tweet is from Omoyele Showore, who says, what is the name of the former top brass with 753 duplexes seized by the EFCC in Abuja? The official EFCC is now doing PR for thieves. They seized this large estate with 753 duplexes from a single individual in Abuja, but can't mention his or her name. If it is Yahoo boys, they will line laptops and Nokia phones in front of them and send their photos globally even before their trial is commenced. The same EFCC is now afraid of big thieves, #Revolution Now. The next tweet is from Dr. Dipo Awojide, who says, one person allegedly stole 100 billion naira. Another person diverted public funds and built 753 units of duplexes and other apartments in Abuja, now seized by EFCC. This is why a majority of our citizens are angry and frustrated. This is part of the reason trust for public officials is really low. This is part of the reason why when federal government says there's no money for subsidies, people grumble and start to abuse. These are the issues. Money for 1,000 schools and hospitals, just one person will steal it. It's too much. N6 also reacted to this, and in his tweet he says, nobody cares. You catch regular Nigerians every day and display their names and faces all over the internet. But a criminal of this magnitude, you want us to be satisfied with? Former top government brass. You guys are taking Nigerians for a sick ride. Name him immediately. And he calls this madness. The next tweet is from John Fanimokun, who says, a former top brass who stole like there is no tomorrow has no name. And you guys want Nigerians to trust you. Sad. Yabo Awokoya also says, you used almost one sheet to glorify yourselves rather than to denounce crime. Oh, I did so well in negotiating with a thief and I recovered a lot of assets. The question is, who is that thief? Say his or her name so that he or she can be shamed. And we hope the case is going to result in jail term. Had it been Murphy, you would have said his name immediately. Stop protecting thieves. Donald Shegun also says, what is the name of the former top government official? Which ministry, department, or agency did he head? At what point did he head the government MDA he stole the money from? What was the amount he stole from the government coffer? After the forfeiture of these properties, what's next? Will they be sold to recover the stolen fund, or they will be left rotting as is the norm in Nigeria? These and many more questions need answers in order to enjoy the trust of the public in your activities. Well, then I'll share. If you ask me, now who I go ask? Joseph Akinade says, if over 1 billion naira can be used to create something as massive as this, just imagine how much of a difference the government and these individuals could make in helping low-income earners escape the dilapidated structures many live in across the country today. Had billions not been misappropriated by figures like Yahaya Bello as accused, and instead been channeled into projects like this, which could afford or provide affordable loans to the poor at low interest rates, the impact could have been huge. That said, kudos to the agency for the work they've done. However, Nigerians are also eager to know who the individual behind this initiative is. And the next tweet is from Ben Samuel, who says, we often hear about seizures and forfeitures, but when these assets are sold to the highest bidder, there's complete silence and the matter is brushed aside. Who owned the Ikoyi property where large sums of cash were discovered? And the final tweet is from Engineer Shaibu, who says, the owner is an alien from Pluto, since he doesn't have a name. And I'm hoping that when he's talking about the person from Pluto, he's not talking about Charlie Poppy. Anyway, will the EFCC cave into the pressure and give Nigerians the name that they are asking for, the name of this top brass official? Or maybe they are planning to disclose the name eventually, and this is just to create suspense in order to make the story sweeter. I joke. Whatever the case is, we'll keep tracking the story, and we'll be sure to always share your thoughts because we recognize the importance of what Nigerians are saying.
The Nigerian Labour Congress, NLC, commenced a nationwide strike yesterday, the 2nd of December. This industrial action has been taken in response to the non-implementation of the 70,000 naira national minimum wage by some state governments. Now, despite assurances from some governors, the NLC is demanding full implementation of the new wage. According to Ambassador Titus Aldu, chairman of the NLC's 2024 National Minimum Wage Implementation Committee, the directive remains unchanged. Any state that has not implemented a new wage or reached a concrete agreement with the labor union will see an indefinite industrial action. The NLC has criticized states making verbal commitments without formal agreements. States like Ebonyi, Nasarawa, and Cross River, who of course commenced an indefinite strike over the non-implementation of the new minimum wage in those states.
I mean, there's also an issue in Ebonyi State where the governor of Ebonyi State, Governor Francis Nwifuru, has given striking workers a deadline to resume work within the next, I think it's 24 to 72 hours, yes, to resume work within the next 72 hours or risk being fired. And part of, the conversation is that these states ought to have abided or stuck to the country's 70,000 naira minimum wage, right? But if they're not sticking by that, then what they're doing is detrimental to the life and the quality of lives of the Nigerian workers. So Joe Ajaero has, of course, stood firmly behind the Nigerian workers. I don't know how this is going to end up playing out. It's some sort of a face-off in Ebonyi State between the governor and the NLC. And if workers will take the threat of the governor and return to work, or if Nigerian Labour, the Labour Congress, will stand very firm until they get the 70,000 minimum wage application in Ebonyi State, and a number of all these other states where it applies.
Yeah, again, to highlight the fact that I've had, pretty strong arguments that, I think there's a person who I saw writing that he doesn't believe that there should be so national minimum wage, yes, there should be the 70,000 naira has been agreed, but he argues rather that there are states that should be paying way more than 70,000 naira. There are states that should be paying maybe 120,000 naira minimum wage. If you look at what their generated revenue, is at the end of each year, highlighting, mostly Lagos State, saying the Lagos State, with the amount of money that Lagos generates, it should not be paying the same amount of money that a Benue State, for example, is being, asked to pay as minimum wage. The argument will continue as to whether there would be also a revision of the minimum wage in the next, couple of years, as the naira's depreciation, maybe continues, because as at the time that the national minimum wage was agreed, naira was not exchanging at 1,700 naira to the dollar, and so it has continued to get worse. What is the actual value of 70,000 naira today? And should the NLC be making other demands aside just an increment in minimum wage? Should the NLC be making other demands like a reduction in the price of petrol, a reduction in the price of electricity?
Well, they tried that as well, but I don't think that
but none of those things were responded to. The government ignored all of those things and just focused on the minimum wage. And so it felt like a battle that was actually lost instead of won. If you look at the value of the naira when this battle started, when it was 7,000 naira, and compare it to when it is now 70,000 naira, you might argue that nothing really has changed. The bag of rice is still 100,000 naira plus. Electricity, for many people is still very, very unaffordable. Transportation prices are still very, very high. If you look at what it costs to fly from Lagos to Abuja currently, and even road transport, transportation across the country. And so not very much was achieved aside just upping the figures for the minimum wage. So there's still a conversation that needs to be had as to how the Nigerian worker would have a more conducive, life. Generally, the price of medication, the price of gas, the price of foodstuff in the market, all these things are maybe double or triple what they used to be. Nigeria's inflation is still, recorded at 33 or 34%. Food inflation is about 40%. But in reality, the argument is that these things are, about 100% inflation in reality. And so the 70,000 naira even, hasn't really changed much. It hasn't really changed much in making life affordable for the average Nigerian. That's, what the truth is. But conversations, of course, will continue.
Yes.
And again, just like Kaloaja, mentioned, he doesn't believe that states like Lagos should be paying 70,000 naira. Should be paying a whole lot more as minimum wage than 70,000 naira.
All right, just to backtrack to what I started with earlier, that's the face-off between the governor of Ebonyi State and the NLC in Ebonyi State. The strike commenced on Monday. The governor has given them a 72-week ultimatum. The NLC in Ebonyi State is saying that, not paying the 70,000 naira minimum wage is impunity against the state. However, the governor has come out to say that every worker there is earning nothing less than 70,000 and that they implemented it almost immediately, that they're not owing salaries, pension, gratuity, that nothing is being owed, so he doesn't understand why they're not coming to work and why they're going on the strike. He's also said that he gives them 72 hours, and if they don't return to work in 72 hours, not only will they be sacked, but they'll be replaced. So I think the 72 hours should elapse on Wednesday, and by Thursday morning, we'll know what next. NLC has responded to the governor saying that he's playing God by saying that they would lose their jobs, and that there's been no dialogue between the governor and Labour Congress within the state. Yeah. But moving away from that, again, when we hear about the NLC having strike because of minimum wage and Nigerians not being able to afford the quality of life, or Nigerian workers not being able to afford the quality of life that they deserve, it reminds us again why Nigerians will feel enraged when they hear headlines like EFCC's top best, largest recovery yet, and still no name. Because imagine how much impact that these monies that are being recovered, how much change they can do in states, in the country, in a country that complains of not having enough money, our budget is not enough, we are borrowing, yet some people are still cutting away billions and trillions. So if citizens don't see that institutions like the EFCC are very keen in fighting corruption and not just talking, but walking the talk by naming names and ensuring that people are thrown behind jail, we will continue going around in circles. It's one thing for the country and the citizens, to say that we don't have enough money, and whilst we're tightening our belts, we're seeing the government doing the same. But it doesn't look like top government officials are doing that. And it seems like until we get to the point where we can remove the excess incentives that these government officials have, these incentives that make them run for office, knowing that they will spend 2 billion naira to buy form and fund their campaign, until we strip the luxury that surrounds public office holders, then we will start to see a country that genuinely is keen on fighting corruption and doing the work, walking the talk when it comes to fighting corruption. And then maybe we'll be able to resolve issues like this labor crisis, because we'll be able to see more money. States will be able to focus on internally generated revenue and to see ways that they can pay their workers.
No, but I mean, the government argued that since the end of the petrol subsidy, it's been able to raise more money to, fund or to give to states every month. And there's been that strong argument that state governors have received, way more money than before since the end of, petrol subsidy. So there is that part. If you look at the news, you would see states like Kaduna and Zamfara, struggling with signing on with the new national minimum wage. Zamfara has stated that it will start, or it has signed an MOU with the NLC, and that it would start the payment from March 2025. And so I think it's also important to look at the reasons why certain states are struggling with being able to afford 70,000 naira minimum wage, which is a pity. It's very, very sad that there are states, like this. And of course, when people argue that there are certain states that are not viable, these are some of the reasons that they would say that. If you cannot pay 7,000 naira minimum wage, then what exactly are you doing, as a state? What, in what ways have you improved on your internal generated revenue in the last 10 years? Every successive government that has come, in what way has that government changed the reality of that state? A lot of times, governors come into states as really just managers, to manage the affairs of the state for 4 years or for 8 years and then disappear. Anyway, so these are extended conversations that we'll continue to expand on. Just once again, highlight the conversation we started with this morning, which was the relationship between France and Nigeria, the concerns from Nigerian citizens concerning what exactly Nigeria is going to be doing with France. In what ways is the French agreement going to be helping Nigeria, and of course helping the mineral sector here in Nigeria? And of course, are there things that Nigerians should be worried about? Are there things that are not being told to Nigerians by the government, behind the, old bilateral agreement talk that we've been told. So these are some of the things that we, of course, highlighted today and will continue to expand upon. We're going to be going to South Africa right after the Breakfast Central this morning, Olive.
Yes,
and
indeed.
Joining Bongani Siziba. Yes,
at some point we're bringing you the update. The president is currently in South Africa, and the BNC conference, the G20 conversations have come up as well, and we'll be bringing you live updates when our correspondent Bongani Siziba connects with us. But that's all that we have for you on today's broadcast. Join us again same time tomorrow, 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. And remember to continue the conversations at News Central TV. And if you've missed any of our interviews and would love to catch up, we have you covered. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at News Central TV. See you tomorrow. I am Olive Emodi.
And I am Osaogi Ogbawa. See you tomorrow.